My name is James Stowe. I am an illustrator and graphic designer. I am also a part-time art instructor, and I am the West representative for the Graphic Artists Guild. And you are listening to the GuildCast.
GuildCast is a weekly podcast series based on the 3 pillars of the Graphic Artists Guild: advocacy, community, and business resources. Keep listening to learn more about the Graphic Artists Guild and visit our website at www.graphicartistsguild.org.
So I think it would be great to talk a little bit about some of the things that are new in the handbook. So in addition to these case studies, which are really interesting, they're in-depth conversations with different creatives in different fields.
The 16th edition of Pricing and Ethical Guidelines is now available on Amazon and www.graphicartistsguild.org. Join the Graphic Artists Guild to get your copy free. Speaking of the Guild Handbook, this 16th and newest edition has all of your old favorites and new content like case studies and a whole new chapter on maximizing income. So, this GuildCast Resources episode is a conversation with longtime Guild members and creative professionals, Ed Shems and Linda Secondari, as they chat with Jessica Abel, the writer of the foreword for the last few editions of the Guild Handbook.
Welcome to our introductory podcast on the Guild Handbook. We'll learn today how to apply to teaching, which is why we have Linda Secondari and Jessica Abel here. They've come to talk to us about the new version that just came out in 2021, and we're very excited about it. So let's jump in. Linda, can you tell us your part of the creation of the Guild Handbook, and then we'll go off to Jessica?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Linda Secondari, and I am the principal of Studio Lo Secondari. We're a design firm in New York City. My background is in publishing, and I'm also a Guild board member. And as I joined the board, we began the process of developing the 16th edition of the Pricing and Ethical Guidelines Handbook, which is just an industry Bible. And because I had a background in publishing, I sort of nominated myself to be the Guild board member responsible for shepherding the process through to publication. So the 16th edition is publishing on May 18th of 2021, and it's a completely revised edition. We've added some great new case studies of small businesses and creatives talking about how they work. And we've also added a section of professional information, larger than beyond what we've had in previous editions. So, and Jessica wrote an amazing foreword to the 16th edition. And I think she's really put a wonderful context around this newest edition and why it's important.
Thanks. I was really honored to be asked to write the foreword. The handbook was really important to me early on in my career. I don't remember who told me about it or gave it to me or whatever it was. I didn't go to art school, so I didn't encounter it, if one does, in art school. And I'm a cartoonist, not one of the categories of sort of primary categories of target for the handbook, at least at that point. Obviously, comics is covered. But I did find it. I was doing some illustration work, and it was really kind of mind-blowing to encounter the handbook. This is in the early 90s, I guess, and see that there's a whole structure around this. You can have a business, and you can know, there are things you can know, and you can have some sort of control over the process, which just, when you're starting out, especially the way I was, just doing the thing and seeing what happens, It just feels super chaotic. And so seeing something like the handbook was really life-changing for me, actually. And I read it.
It always felt like the clients had all to say, but suddenly the handbook makes you realize just what you just said, makes you realize that you have some control.
Yeah. And agency and control is, I want to say, at this point, my primary subject as a teacher and as a coach. And, where I am right now in my creative life is trying to help other people feel that. And so getting the opportunity to write the foreword for the new edition of the handbook it felt like kismet. It felt like, wow, this is exactly where I want to be. This is exactly where my thoughts about this need to land.
Yeah, and I think that that's one of the amazing things about the handbook, because, as I said, we're in the 16th edition. This book has been published over the course of the past 35 years. And this idea of not only giving business practices to creative professionals who, I know when I went to school, I didn't have any professional practice instruction whatsoever. And the handbook was the first thing I bought as soon as I graduated from art school, because I got a project and I had no idea what to bid it. It was a not-for-profit, but it was a large international not-for-profit. And I was doing, a little card for them. And I had no idea. And I looked, and here was this magical book that had the answers to all my questions. And in the back of it had a contract that I could actually just Xerox and fill in. And I mean, everything was done. It was amazing. But to understand that those two aspects, the business, the pricing, but also the business practices and the tools that creatives need in order to be able to conduct the business, to understand that need way back in the 70s is, I think, really foresightful of them. And it has aged really well. There's a lot of these resources that haven't aged well. But the handbook certainly has.
Well, it's funny to know that the handbook started out as like a pamphlet. It's like, people need to know this. It's kind of like a quick podcast. Like, people need to know that. I just realized something that people don't know. Creatives don't know. Here's that information. And then once you see that information, you start to realize how much more there is to know. And it seems like it just got built up and built up and built up with more and more. And what I love about it is it's built up with all this information I didn't know that I needed. And I think that's where a lot of people come from.
Yeah, I really agree with that. I think that there's this, I had this impulse early on when I was learning comics. I, again, was not that one could learn comics in art school at that point, but learning on my own from early internet sources, deeply buried in message boards or whatever. And it was really, really hard to get hold of that kind of information, both who's publishing and how do you deal with those kinds of things, as well as using tools and so on. And really early on, I had this impulse to share what I had learned, and not the business side of it, but the tools and so on. So I created parts of my website in the 90s where it's like, how do you use brushes, or how do you scan things, that kind of stuff. And so I totally understand that impulse. And I can imagine that early crew at the Guild saying, we need to share this, or maybe, sitting around beers, or I'm making this up, but, sitting around and just saying, like, we've got to tell the young people coming into this field what the standards are, that there are ethical standards. People are getting mistreated. People they don't know what things should cost. That means that they're getting taken advantage of, which means we can get taken advantage of. We need to get together on this, and we need to make sure everybody knows. It just makes so much sense to me.
It also aligns the experienced people as well. You didn't have to just be new at this to not know what you were doing, or to be doing things wrong. The experienced people, used handshakes, and I think that's a bad thing for the young people to learn from. So it's helpful to be reminded how you're supposed to be running, because it should be run like a regular business.
Right. And then there are the more complicated aspects of our business in terms of like intellectual property rights, which, not everybody has to deal with. And in the case of illustrators, whether you're going to license your work or give rights over completely. These are sort of heady questions, and to have a resource that you can go to for very specific scenarios, I think is super useful. Jessica, how do you use the handbook when you're teaching your students or in your coaching practice?
I think the number one way I use it is as a go-to when some student comes to me and says, somebody's reached out to me to do some random job. If you teach undergrads, you know that inexperienced people who want something drawn will frequently reach out to undergrads and they can be terrible clients. They may not mean badly at all. They may be trying to do the right thing, but they don't know what they should be paying. They don't know they don't know anything about contracts. They don't know anything about intellectual property. And so students, even who are not my students, but are at the school, will come to me because I'm sort of known for this and say, what do I do? And I'll say, get the book, go get the handbook, read the handbook. You need to know this stuff. This is your suit of armor that you're going to wear out into the world. And so that's the number one thing. And then I actually teach a class called Professional Practices, where it is a textbook that we use in the class. And I just have, I have students read certain sections of it, especially things around intellectual property and a little bit about marketing and other, entities, things like that. I teach some of those things differently, but I also, I want them to own the book. So I kind of set it up so that they have to get it in order to do certain things. And I have them use the letter of agreement, for example, and reformat it, put their logo on it, put their information on it. So they're good to go. They've read it. They know what it is. And when somebody comes to them with something random, they have kind of a checklist of what they should be looking at. Even if they don't remember what I told them about contracts, even if they don't remember the whole thing about the package of rights, copyright, blah, 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 they still have something where they can go through and say, all right, where is this going to be published? How long? How many? Who has all those things, right? Those kind of checklist questions that even for the most scattered undergrad is going to work. For my older cohorts, people who are mid-career, people who I work with in a more coaching context, it comes up in the same kind of way in some ways, because a lot of people I work with are transitioning from one area to another. They're, pivoting from one field to another. And not all of them are graphic artists, but the ones who are, it's a go-to resource that comes up frequently when people are saying, well, how do I handle this situation? I don't know how much to ask to be paid. I don't know how to do any of this stuff. And I'm like, well, there's this one place you can go and get all this stuff. And it's interesting because I thought a few minutes ago, Ed, I think you said something about, maybe it was Linda, you don't know what you don't know, right? When you're getting started, you kind of have this big void. You don't know what you don't know. And that's the downside of Googling for this stuff. It's not that you can't find some information about intellectual property, but you can't get this comprehensive look at the question from the point of view of a graphic artist without knowing what you're looking for, And so having this top-down organization, which is like, look, here are the big issues and here's the reading on each of these issues, is just so valuable.
But I don't want people to think that you have to read the whole book.
Oh, right? No.
No, it's important to know that, yes, you send your students off to read the book, but it's really reading certain sections and brushing up.
I have them read a couple sections of chapters so that we have things to talk about in class. And like I said, I almost set it up that way so that they have to buy the book, so they have it as a resource when they need it, not so they read it from cover to cover. Because you just can't absorb it all at once. There's so much in there. You can't. I don't think I ever really read it until I was teaching it. And then I thought, well, I better kind of read this and see what's in there and see what do I need to use. And I did that. But then, previously I'd just gone into what I needed and found what I needed.
It grows with you, I find that you dip into it, maybe you're looking for pricing, maybe you need that contract. I do want to mention that when you buy the book, the contracts are available digitally as well. You get access to the digital contracts when you buy the book, which is amazing.
Back in the day, we had to type them in.
Right. but it grows with you, and as your questions change, you refer back to it, and lo and behold, there's the answer to that question too. So it's a big book, so it's got a lot of information, and a lot of very intelligent people were involved in putting it together. So
you've called it an industry Bible, but you know what I think is kind of interesting and funny about that is, like, you know how the theories of the writing of the Bible are that, many people wrote it over hundreds of years. It's kind of like that, because if you actually read it through, which I did in order to teach it, you come across the same topics multiple times from multiple points of view.
Yeah.
So I'm sure there's, you discuss this when you're redoing it, but like there's reasons why you have one discussion of marketing here and another discussion of it over here. It doesn't have to be all in one place, but it's this interesting thing when you can hear different voices,
Mm-hmm. And it's, industry specific, because what, works for a textile designer may not work for an illustrator or a graphic designer. So we have that perspective. But the other thing I think that puts the handbook apart from most of the other, not that there are any books that are as comprehensive as the handbook, but, if you go and you look, there are competitors, is the fact that there's the Graphic Artists Guild sort of supporting the handbook. And so in terms of intellectual property rights, the Guild, expends a lot of energy and effort in fighting for those rights and ensuring that creatives have a voice or a seat at the table through our organization and our partnerships with other organizations. So I think that's also what makes it so legit, is that it's not just a publishing house decided to put this book together and hired a bunch of people who know about stuff and they wrote it. This is, the blood, sweat, and tears of an organization that exists for its creatives. And if you become a member of the Graphic Artists Guild, you get the handbook for free. So that's even better. That's the best deal ever.
Yeah.
Just a little plug.
The 16th edition of Pricing and Ethical Guidelines by the Graphic Artists Guild is now available on Amazon and www.graphicartistsguild.org.
I was at Icon in 2018. That's the Illustrators Conference. And I think it was 2018. It was the last one they had, and then 2020 had to be canceled. And I was there representing the Guild with Hayden Adams, and we had a table there, and we had pegs, which had just, that version of it had just, the 15th version, I guess, had come out, and people were very interested. They like knowing that we're updating, that we're constantly, who am I? That the Guild is constantly updating pegs so that it stays as current as it possibly can. And illustrators appreciated it. I can't tell you how many conversations I had at Icon with people who were excited about the new book, and even those who wanted to get a better understanding of how to use it, how to open it up, and how to just start, crack it open and understand what's in it. And, one of the, I'm going to call it a complaint, but I'm going to put it in context. One of the complaints, though, is that people look at the pricing and there's a large expanse. I'm just going to make something up. An editorial illustration in full color for a national magazine, and I'm just going to make up numbers, $500 to $3,000. And people can say, well, hold on. Why aren't you answering my question? Why aren't you telling me what I should be charging? Well, that's because there are other things that are very particular to you, and also very particular to who's hiring you. And so you have to use the book, but also understand the book to really understand where you're going to be in those prices. And I found that having those prices there were really helpful in my early days, in kind of feeling like it was okay to tell my clients a price, because I could back it up by saying, I looked it up, there's the information from the Graphic Arts Guild in the Pricing and Ethical Guidelines Handbook that, you write it all out in the email, by the way, because it sounds more impressive that way, where the numbers were from here to here, and my numbers fall right here. And I wouldn't get pushback. People would recognize that there's authority behind that. I'm not sure if authority is the right word, but there's precedent behind that. Precedence. And it's a really helpful device for that.
Yeah. And if, the pricing guidelines are meant to be used in in a complementary way with your own pricing, and the guidebook helps you figure out what your kind of like base hourly rate should be in quite a lot of detail. So you have your rate, and then you can see how it's how it fits in the context of this larger range. And, one of the reasons it is a large range is because pricing in different areas of the country vary greatly. Pricing based on your client will vary greatly. So ultimately, when we're surveying the industry, you do get a wide swath of difference, but it should always be kind of contextualized with what your own baseline pricing is. And the guidebook does a really good job of walking anyone through that.
And not to pitch anything here, but I'm doing a webinar next week for the Guild called Ready, Set, Freelance, where we talk about pricing and how pricing, once you start to realize that pricing can be somewhat arbitrary in our industries, you can understand how many of your clients will be at a higher end, or will potentially be at a higher end there. So if the Guild were to put in the lowest number there and, say $500 and up, well, most people are going to end up saying $500 rather than saying, something that's up.
So I think it would be great to talk a little bit about some of the things that are new in the handbook. So in addition to these case studies, which are really interesting, they're in-depth conversations with different creatives in different fields, and they talk about how they've set up their businesses, what their professional practices are, and a little bit of what their trajectory was, which I think as a small business owner myself, it's really great to see how I compare to these stories. But we also have a completely new chapter on maximizing income. And that has, it has information about self-promotion and marketing, and all the different things that creatives can do. Some more traditional, like writing notes or e-newsletters, a ton of different things, but addressing some of those income opportunities to generate more income and to get more visibility, which I think is a great addition.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing it. I haven't actually seen the finished book yet, so it's going to be fun.
Should be getting one very soon.
I know.
I love case studies.
All of our members will be receiving them in the next month or so. So that's really exciting.
Pretty exciting.
And when you receive your handbook, we would love it if folks would take a picture of the handbook or yourself with the handbook and post it online with hashtag #MyGuildHandbook. And that would be wonderful. We'd love to just see how they're getting delivered across the country and who's getting them and how excited you are. So
I love that. I love the idea of making sure that people know about the book too. I mean, it's so important.
Well, I think what's interesting in the transition with undergrads that I'm dealing with, and also again with mid-career people I'm dealing with who are pivoting from one area to another, from one field to another, is frequently there's just a lot of people feel a lot of resistance to imagining themselves as having a business. You know, just creatives in general. I felt this way coming up. You feel like I just want to make work. I just want it to happen. I want things to happen. And, you know, there are exceptions to this rule, obviously. But for a lot of people, the idea of thinking yourself as a business owner, having a business, needing to take care of these things can feel really overwhelming. It can feel really, it's not something that most creatives are trained to do in school. They are not given tools for this. This is one of the things that in the illustration program that I lead at the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts, I have set out to change, that we talk about it all the time. Like how does this fit into the world? If illustration is art as a service, then, what does that mean? So anyway, trying to get that to happen in schools is really, really important, but failing that, I feel like the handbook can be kind of that course in a book, right? You have to actually use it, of course. You have to do something with it once you get it. But it really, the difference for me, it takes time to build up the skill set of having a creative business. It takes a long time to learn, what is my pricing? How do I think about this? How do I talk about it? How do I negotiate? This contract, this is sort of a beginner contract. It works great. Oh, but now I need this thing. Now I need to add that in. Oh, I have to talk to a lawyer. I need a lawyer. Who's a lawyer? There's this kind of gradual accretion of elements to the creative business that build up. But the core piece of it is a sense of ownership over this, that you're allowed to have this relationship with the world, that it's this recentering of yourself as an entity with standing alongside your clients. That it's not your clients and you're just like this, flibberty-gibbet, freelancer person who comes in and does stuff. You are equal to them legally. You have this equal standing with them. That's the ethical guidelines piece. That's all of the intellectual property stuff that's in the handbook. Just getting super clear on that you have standing and you're allowed to do this. And it's going to be hard. You're going to have a lot of stuff to learn, but you can kind of pull up your shorts then and do it instead of feeling like, oh, it's impossible. I'm too right-brained, which, by the way, is not a thing. Not a thing, guys. So.
Wait, are you sure?
Yeah.
I can't use that anymore?
No. You can, but only if you undercut it with jokes like I do.
Oh, I see. Well, we're just gonna edit that part out of this podcast.
Oh, okay. You're gonna just suppress the knowledge that there's no such thing as right brain and left brain.
Mine, anyway.
Doesn't mean you can't be silly, but doesn't locate in the right of your brain.
It's not because you can draw that you're silly.
Yeah, exactly.
I think another thing that's important for professionals, and especially for young emerging professionals to understand, is that, what they do has implications on everybody else, so if you're not considerate about how your intellectual property is being used or what you're pricing a project at, that's going to then, go out into the bloodstream and impact other people. Some you may know and some you may not know. So we all, we're all in this boat together. So again, like having a resource, a touchstone that we all can refer to kind of keeps us all in the same lanes, and is
collective action.
Right.
Yeah. It's about collective action, even if you're not, out there marching in the streets for, intellectual property rights or whatever, you still, like, by acting in accordance with certain standards, you are helping your field and other people in your field, your colleagues. I think the flip side of that too is to understand, and this relates to this thing of having standing, is that I think graphic artists often don't understand how valuable their work is to their clients, how essential it is to their clients, that it absolutely is something that, campaigns can live and die on this, right? If people are using your work for marketing or something like that, it's so essential. Graphic design can make things readable and, just absolutely, fit into your life. It can be inspiring, or it can be completely unreadable and you can't do anything with it and you just bounce off the surface of it and can't get anything out of it. The things that we do are the core of function in society, that our visual cortex takes up something like 3/4 of our brain, it's like this enormous amount, like the difference between that and like the amount of space given over to spoken word and like reading and seeing visual cortex stuff is a total imbalance where as human beings, we are programmed to communicate and understand through images.
Coming up on this episode of GuildCast.
Well, we've lost elections and horrible things have happened because of bad design. So
great things have happened because of good design.
Exactly. So we should all totally respect.
Right. But there's
the visual.
There's the newbie who comes in and says, "Well, aren't they doing me a favor by letting me do this design or letting me do this illustration?" And what do you say to them?
It's a super tough one because I do think that, there's this sort of journeyman intern level work that you've got to do in order to get to the point where you are, you're going to be able to fully contribute to an organization.
Join the Graphic Artists Guild to listen to the full version of this episode at www.graphicartistsguild.org. Thanks for listening to GuildCast. Coming up in next week's episode.
Yeah, so we've done team building exercises before, and I will say that our goal is really to capture the ideas coming out of it. So if a team is getting together and they're doing whatever teams do, like trust falls or personality assessments or whatever, we're not necessarily there to draw the trust fall, although we could, but we're really there to document the insights that come out of it. Our team now we're more trustworthy, or we have a problem with letting go, or we have a problem, or we're really good with staying on task. Whatever the insight is that comes out of these sessions, that's what we're there to capture. But
GuildCast is a weekly podcast series based on the 3 pillars of the Graphic Artists Guild: advocacy, community, and business resources. Keep listening to learn more about the Graphic Artists Guild and visit our website at www.graphicartistsguild.org.